Hi everybody, it's great to be here with you today. So this panel will effectively, following on from that really interesting discussion on startups and fundraising, look at really three fascinating, challenging brands who grew fundamentally from startups, and we'll talk a little bit about how all of these businesses have really leveraged very disruptive methods of growth. So just to introduce myself, I'm Katie Turner. My business Multiple is a consultancy business, and we work with technology companies like this every day to help them scale really effectively through purpose, people, platforms. So really why, who, and how. So my team spends all day, every day thinking about how to solve growth problems and growth challenges. So it's awesome to be sharing the stage with you guys today to get the benefit of the experts and hear about their experience. So I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce ourselves firstly before we kick off.
Sure. So I'm Dan Warren. I'm the Managing Director for the UK and Ireland for Deliveroo. I joined the business about 2 years ago when we were a very small enterprise. We were doing about 200 orders a day. We're doing a lot more than that now, which has been great to see, but it's put a lot of pressure on me and the team. We're now an international organization. We run in 13 different countries, and we've learned a lot over the last 2 years, which hopefully I can share some of with you guys today.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Guy Orgel. I'm the Director for UK and Ireland at Tesla, and been with them for about 2.5 years. Prior to that, I was European GM for Yammer, which was sort of 3 people at Tech Hub for a little while before we grew to 85, and then we got acquired by Microsoft. So some growth experience there too.
Hi, everyone. I'm Harsh Sinha. I am VP of Product Engineering at TransferWise, the international money transfer startup. And before this, I was at PayPal, working on the consumer mobile app across all the countries. TransferWise has gone through quite a bit of growth. Right now, we're at 60 countries. You can send money to 60 countries, and we're moving about 500 million pounds a month in volume.
And I think, Harsh, you're also at eBay as well.
Yeah, before that, I was at eBay, running engineering and product for a lot of different teams, so long tenure there.
So yeah, some fascinating experience of building businesses to really significant scale on this stage. So let's get started, and to kick off, guys, I wanted to talk a little bit about the growth inside your business. Now, we all know that growth is a relatively jagged and inconstant curve, so it rarely happens consistently. Often it accelerates at key inflection points, and I wanted to just have each of you sort of talk a little bit and explore the key inflection points that occurred in your business that really drove significant growth, and really what happened before them to take you up to those points. Perhaps, Dan, we can start with you.
Sure. So I think for us, we have an advantage in that we're a marketplace. So we've always been able to leverage brands. And unlike perhaps other players in the space, we work with restaurant brands that people are very familiar with. And so consequently, in the early stages, we could leverage marketing within those restaurants, within those physical locations, on their websites. And over time, we've been able to add very well-known, iconic restaurant brands. And every time we've done that, whether it was a Nando's or a Wagamama or a ZZ, they have made a very large impact on our sales. So while the core of our proposition has been focused on independent restaurants, artisanal chefs, and we still very much do that, I'd be lying if I suggested that when you add those big name brands, you don't get a huge inflection point, as you say, to the velocity of growth. But it's not just that. You know, as I say, I joined the business a couple of years ago, just after we'd received a Series A round. And while we'd been focused on a small area of London to ensure that we could make the unit economics work for the business and to ensure that it was something that consumers came back to use over and over again, which is vital to growth of any business. While we did that initially, after the funding round, it gave us that opportunity and impetus to grow very quickly. So my job when I came in was to scale the business across the rest of London, to scale the business across all of the UK, and then our first international market, which was Ireland. And that gave us the opportunity then to raise a lot more money, which candidly is very important to any startup. So I mean, it's a very straightforward answer, but the reality is that did have that impact.
Sure. And my understanding with you guys was that you took this very deliberate postcode by postcode strategy. Is that the case? And you kind of proved the model, and you had to, of course, to build liquidity in the marketplace, build supply and demand at the same time.
Yeah,
I mean, it's quite a challenging model versus perhaps some of the
it's a little bit of a complex model because you have to, every time you go to a new market, you have to overstaff drivers in order to ensure you give great customer experience to the first cohort of customers that you get in that market. So you could take a bold approach and try and estimate the volume you're going to get and match the drivers accordingly, but you get such volatility in those early stages when you're not driving big volume that's too risky. So you end up, as you go market to market, burning a little bit of cash initially to make sure of that great customer experience. So before we got that first funding round, that's one of the reasons why it was a very kind of Central One London-centric proposition. And once we got that, we were able to scale it quite quickly. We learned as well along the way how to scale it, how to market in an economical way. We learned how to, as I said before, leverage the restaurants we were working with to get that demand up as quickly as possible. And now we've got that down to a bit of a fine art, which is obviously great and economically a little better.
Indeed. Harsh, could you perhaps talk a little bit about growth within TransferWise? Again, you have sort of a similar complexity in a way in your model as it's a peer-to-peer model. Could you talk a little bit about what really kind of drove spikes of growth with the development of TransferWise?
Yeah, so we're a little different than Deliveroo, where we're not a marketplace. So it's pretty much a one-sided market, one-sided network, right? And people coming on. So our biggest market, initially, we started here in the UK. And our founders were trying to move money between Europe and the UK. So that's how the story goes. And basically, it's still, UK to Europe is still our biggest market and biggest route. And we've gone from 0 to now being about 5% of all money moving out of the UK. And the thing that we learned as we went along was basically most of our growth has come from word of mouth. And the way it was worked is like over time, as we've improved the product, we've learned. So we do this survey, the NPS survey, which a lot of companies do. And we started to learn that as our product improved, the invite program did better. So initially, we tried a lot of different things. We tried getting into some hypothesis around students who are living abroad or living in the UK. They need to move funds and fees. So we should have student ambassadors in the campuses. We would give them referrals, and they would bring in more people, and they would get paid. Kind of worked in some places, but really didn't give us those spikes. Over time, we realized that actually our product just wasn't good enough. So having a culture and having a product which gets pushed faster and is actually working on the 4 pillars that we believe, which is speed, price, convenience, and coverage. Those are the main pillars. If you work at TransferWise and if you're in a team and you don't work on making things cheaper, faster, giving more coverage so you can move money around the world more and more convenient, you're working on the wrong things. That's what we believe. And we've seen those 4 pillars, optimizing them drives the NPS higher. And we've seen that once people get to that range of 9 to 10 on a scale of 0 to 10, that's when their invites spike up. And we obviously have incentives to invite, but people, even if you give them a lot of incentive to invite and give them money, they would not invite it because they're losing social capital when they invite their friends to a product that doesn't work as well. So fix the product. When NPS hits 70, 80, that's when you start to see this invite program working well, and then word of mouth going up.
Yeah. And that relationship, I think, between product and growth is crucial to so many businesses. There's so many ways that you can actually bake growth into your product.
Yeah.
Of course, Tesla is a horse of a very different color, Georg. I'd love to hear from you in terms of how, what's really driven the growth of your business in a very different space with a very different product.
Sure. So when I joined the company, I decided I'd try to keep my day simple. I think narrowing down to 5 things I could wake up and think about. And actually, 2.5 years on, I still wake up and think about the same 5 things. And they are simply, real estate and charging. Where can you physically interact with the product? Communications and marketing. Where can you find out where to go to physically interact with the product? Sales operations, to make sure you have a great experience when you do. People operations, to make sure that we've got the right people doing those things. And finally, finance, insurance, leasing, that sort of things. Make sure you can actually buy it. So for us, the inflection point, we needed to get all of those things up to a base level. where people felt confident in buying the car, and in particular on the charging side, that you could travel to 80% of the UK conveniently and confidently, at which point people just started to buy the car in volume. And then the real inflection point came when we started to deliver the cars in bulk, which happened for us kind of early Q3 last year, or mid Q3 last year. Suddenly we had a huge volume of deliveries come to the UK, and then the referral business kicked in. Because the first thing you do when you take a Tesla home, show your friends, family, neighbors, everyone you've ever met, you tell them about it, you put it on Facebook. And then they start buying the car, because I think we've both, everyone's talked about the power of referral and word of mouth. So once that kicked in, we've taken off.
Fantastic. So a different question. We all know that we kind of learn a lot through making mistakes, and I think the audience here would be fascinated to know what mistakes you guys have made. And again, I'm thinking specifically in terms of a growth strategy that you thought would be highly effective and just kind of fell flat. It would be great to learn from your mistakes. Perhaps Harsh, we could start with you.
Yeah, so I think the early mistake was that can you take marketing and basically spend a lot of money on marketing and get users to come on, right?
Sure.
And when you raise money, you were looking to get into a high growth, like the curve, right? And while you're working on the product, you're still trying to get more and more, month over month growth. And I think that was the biggest mistake early on, to think about, even though the product's not ready, you can push marketing and you can get people to come on, but to convert and actually become repeat users, which is where you would actually get your cost of acquisition back. It won't be on the first transaction, it'll be over time. That's where we learned that it was just not a workable product as much, and then getting that curve of the invites won't happen. So I think that was the biggest thing, where we said you need to improve the product to get to an NPS state, which we would say around above 70 is when we would start pushing marketing. Before that we would not.
Yeah, so not to cut in here, but I was going to answer exactly the same question exactly the same way. So for us, in our desire to move quickly and expand into new geographies and open new restaurant relationships, we spent a lot of money on marketing when the product, which in our case is the restaurants we have on the platform, our ability to execute operationally in the right way, was just not ready. So we would drive a lot of customers to the platform, they'd have a bad first-time experience, and they'd never come back again. And as I said earlier, our whole business is built around retention. And if that retention isn't going to occur because you haven't got your ducks in a row at the beginning, then you waste a huge amount of money trying to build the business up. And we did that, probably 10 markets. We have a very enthusiastic team. They like to move very quickly, and I like to move very quickly. But it definitely was a learning, and it's something we've applied now to every market launch moving forward.
Fantastic. Georg, the highs and lows of Tesla are reasonably well documented, but it would be great to know whether you would point to any particular kind of moment of failure that taught you a lot.
Yeah, a couple of lessons I've learned along the way. Just to pick up on a point Dan made, I think I remember being in a postcode that was adjacent to a Deliveroo postcode, and pinging the Deliveroo guys all the time, say, when are you coming to my postcode? So there is sometimes a scarcity advantage, and actually Tesla does something similar where we match supply and demand pretty carefully, so that there's always more demand than supply, and so you create kind of scarcity appetite. The major lesson I've learned is to always have plan A, B, and C. And the mistake that we made in certain cases, in particular here in the UK, where we were trying to implement a kind of one-shot kill, single deal to rule them all to solve all of our charging problems, when that deal fell apart for various reasons, we didn't have plan B. And that was like just ridiculous. So now we have plan A, B, and C. And the other reason is because even a company of our size now, which we still like to think of ourselves as a startup, and we change direction quite frequently, is that it's not okay to say to the CEO, well, I had plan A because we were operating to plan A, and now that you've changed plan B, I need some time.
Yeah.
There is no time. Have plan B ready to go so that you can jump into action.
Fantastic. There was a really interesting panel on talent earlier on today, and in my business, we do a huge amount of work on people and culture and believe that that's one of the keys to success. I wonder if you could just quickly comment, because we're short on time, but quickly comment on the importance of culture in your business and whether you see a marriage between culture and growth. Maybe we can start with you again, Georg.
Do you know, I think it's hugely important. I previously worked at Yammer, which had an extraordinary culture. And actually, interestingly, it came from the engineering team. I think that was the bedrock of our culture. So we were very data-driven, very collaborative. It was also part of the product, ultimately, for those of you that know it. At Tesla, it's slightly different. We don't really talk about culture all that much, but we have a very strong can-do, do what it takes, take no prisoners, be intense kind of culture that really comes from Elon. And I think in our case, we're a very founder-led company, and we take direction from him. He says being at Tesla is like special forces, which is basically like if you remember the old Royal Marines advert, 99% need not apply. That's generally our attitude too.
Yeah, great. Dan?
So for me, I joined the company where we had 9 employees and everybody had a real sense of responsibility for the growth of the organization. So now that we have 700, most of which have joined over the last 6 months, somehow you need to culturally ensure that they have that same sense of responsibility for what they do day in, day out. And that's quite a hard process, and I'm sure the guys in the talent seminar have a better answer to how you handle that than I do. But we do continue to try with every new individual that comes into the business to foster the sense of responsibility for the little piece of the business that they own. And we do a very good job, I think, as a business of ensuring that we communicate to them why that piece is central to our overall business strategy. So they feel empowered by that, and we give them a lot of autonomy to take decisions and run that corner of the organization. One other thing that we do really well, which I probably shouldn't say this, but it is the truth, we celebrate success, and we are willing to not take ourselves too seriously around that, which, you know, when you make people work 12, 15, 18, 24 hours a day, you have to be sure to party with them as well, and we still do that. So hopefully that doesn't go away.
Harsh.
So yeah, I mean, I think we are a very, as I said before, product-driven company, and engineering, so we don't even call it just engineering, it's product engineering, and the bit around autonomous teams being empowered to make decisions. So the idea being the people who are closest to the customer are the ones who would make decisions. So if I have a day where I make 0 decisions, most successful day for me, right? Because if you're launching Australia, the team that is launching Australia knows what the Australian customer wants more than like, you know, somebody having in a traditional organization where decisions go up and then come down. And the other bit that is very important around culture is to make sure that everybody in the organization, including marketing, has enablement to make sure that they can make changes that they want. So our marketing team actually has engineering in it, and also is close to the customer. So whether you're working on a back-end product, front-end product, everybody has a customer-focused, customer-facing KPI. And that's why I said those 4 pillars, if you think about them, speed, convenience, coverage, and price, all of them are customer metrics. I didn't say stuff like uptime, which our infra team would look at. But in general, there usually would be something like that. The marketing team would be looking at customer focus, but actually all teams look at that.
Yeah.
Can I jump? I have like one tiny
Very
takeaway.
quickly you can.
Which is the sort of from the last session and this one. The best definition of leadership that I have ever heard is Colin Powell's definition. If you YouTube Colin Powell leadership, it's the best 2.5 minutes you can spend if you want to instill a sense of autonomy and culture into your teams. What he says is, you know you're a great leader when people will follow you, if only out of curiosity. It's amazing.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Sadly, we have to leave it there. I wish I could talk to you all day. I have a bunch more questions, but unfortunately, we're out of time. To summarize, I think, you know, what the guys have talked through is, you know, growth is fundamentally driven by product excellence, by maintaining great culture, by getting your customers to be your evangelist, and strangely by Colin Powell. Who knew? Thanks, guys.
Thank you.